Tonight on NewsWatch, reforming the NSA. A look at the president's new plan on the agency's surveillance program.
Plus, ceasefire in Syria. How a new proposal from the government could help upcoming peace talks.
And find out what it takes to become a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. President Obama today defended the government's massive domestic spying program, but announced some changes.
Those changes are aimed at calming public and congressional outrage over the National Security Agency's program. Dale Hurd has more in tonight's top story.
Today, the president announced that the NSA spying program will be reformed.
I believe we need a new approach.
The so-called metadata, phone numbers of hundreds of millions of Americans and details of who they called and when, will still be collected, but not stored by the government. If the government wants to access the massive database, it will need court approval.
But the devil's in the details. How much of this reform conversation is going to be about curtailing the specific surveillance programs, and how much of it is going to be instead about improving the checks and balances on the programs that already exist.
The White House aggressively argued that the surveillance program has been critical in preventing terror attacks, even though its own review panel concluded that the program hasn't prevented any attacks.
We have to make some important decisions about how to protect ourselves and sustain our leadership in the world while upholding the civil liberties and privacy protections that our ideals and our Constitution require.
A firestorm was sparked by the leak of classified information by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. Last month, the White House panel offered President Obama 46 recommendations, including shutting down the phone surveillance program because it presents a lurking danger of abuse. But already critics say the president's announcement will make it more difficult for the intelligence community to do its job.
That's a pre-9/11 mindset, and that would make me uncomfortable.
President Obama wants the intelligence gathering changes in place by April. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And for more on this, we turn now to Dr. Mary Manjikian. She's an associate professor at Regent University's Robertson School of Government. Mary, thanks so much for being with us.
No problem.
Well, today the president was trying to calm critics of the NSA monitoring program. Do you think he succeeded?
I don't feel that he calmed me. I think that it was an interesting approach. He took us through 200 years of history of intelligence, and what he really showed us is that security and liberty are two values that are in tension, and they're always going to be in tension. This isn't a problem he's going to solve this afternoon or even this decade.
Mary, has the damage already been done?
I'm a bit of a technological determinist, and I think that once you discover a new technology like this, you can't put it back in the box. And that's really what I see, is that we have almost like a surveillance arms race. He said in that speech, China and Russia aren't even going to have this conversation. So we don't really have the luxury of saying, we're not going to use this technology. There's really no way to have a moral high ground.
Is the government moving in the right direction now to try and protect America's privacy?
I think he did what he could, but I think this is just the first stage of a conversation that's going to go on for a very long time.
Well, Mary, should Americans have the right to transparency from the government when it comes to privacy issues?
I don't really see this so much as a privacy issue as I do as a security issue. We don't have the right to know where all the ships are stationed in the Persian Gulf. We don't have the right to have the codes for the nuclear launch sites.
Thank goodness.
Yes, that certain things, that's why we have to trust our public officials, is because they're going to act on our behalf and sometimes even without our knowledge.
Well, from an international standpoint, how have the NSA revelations hurt America, and do you think that we can recover from this?
I think they made us look a bit hypocritical. There's kind of that do as I say and not as I do. And I think he addressed that very well in the speech as well. He said that America, somehow or other, has to be a democracy and yet still find a way to use surveillance to protect Americans. And that's a tricky job.
All right, Mary Manjikian. I like that last name. Interesting name. Thanks for coming over from the Regent School of Government. We appreciate your insights very much.
Thank you.
Mark, back to you.
Congress has passed a $1.1 trillion bipartisan spending bill. It increases spending by about $26 billion, mostly for domestic programs. It also pays for the implementation of Obamacare. Democrats and Republicans say the measure is a compromise to prevent an election year government shutdown, but not everyone is happy. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma says lawmakers ignored an opportunity to eliminate wasteful programs.
President Obama says his administration is committed to promoting religious freedom across the globe. So CBN's White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon asked Press Secretary Jay Carney to give her some examples of how, and to assure the American people that the Obama administration is doing everything it can to help persecuted Christians in Iran.
Absolutely. We are appealing to the Iranian government when it comes to those who are being held, and we have, and I have raised it frequently from this podium, and we continue to do that. Broadly, we aggressively support religious freedom around the world and make clear our opposition to policies in countries that restrict religious freedom. And that's a broad, comprehensive effort.
Despite America's new nuclear deal with Iran, Carney says the administration's posture towards Iran's human rights atrocities and ties to terrorism remains the same.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is blasting the European Union for being hypocritical in its criticism of Israel. Netanyahu says the EU calls in Israeli ambassadors to complain about Israel building settlements in biblical Judea and Samaria, but it never reprimands Palestinians.
When did the EU call in the Palestinian ambassadors to complain about the incitement that calls for Israel's destruction? When did the Palestinian ambassadors get called in to hear complaints about the fact that security officers in the Palestinian security forces are participating in terrorist attacks against innocent Israelis? I think it's time to stop this hypocrisy. I think it's time to inject some balance and fairness into this discussion.
Netanyahu says this bias against Israel hinders the peace process because the Palestinians think they won't be held accountable.
Less than a week away from peace talks in Geneva, the Syrian government is offering a possible ceasefire in one of the most contested cities, a plan that, if successful, could be used as a model for other parts of the war-torn country. Ephraim Graham has more.
The Syrian government says it is ready to implement a ceasefire and exchange detainees with rebel forces in the war-torn city of Aleppo. They say the move is a confidence-building measure ahead of the Geneva II peace conference next week. Those talks are expected to bring together members of the Syrian government and opposition forces for the first time. The goal is to find a political solution to the nearly 3-year-old civil war. The United States has been urging the Syrian opposition to attend the conference, stressing their attendance is vital to their credibility, and also expressing the concern for the rise of extremism in Syria.
The world needs no reminder that Syria has become the magnet for jihadists and extremists. It is the strongest magnet for terror of any place today. It is important that there be no games played with this process.
Secretary of State John Kerry also says the U.S. will continue to fight for the exchange and release of captive journalists and aid workers in order to try to improve the climate for negotiations. Meanwhile, the United Nations is renewing its call on all nations to take in Syrian refugees.
This is a responsibility of the international community. And that is why we have been strongly appealing for all borders everywhere to be open to Syrians, not only the borders of the neighboring countries.
According to the UN, more than 2 million Syrians have fled the country since the war broke out. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Back in the U.S., a Pennsylvania judge struck down today a nearly 2-year-old voter ID law. The measure has required nearly all the state's voters to show photo identification when at the polls. The law has been one of the strictest in the nation. It was enacted by Republican Governor Tom Corbett in March 2012. But many Democrats oppose the measure, saying it deprives people of the right to vote. Today's decision sets up a possible courtroom battle before Pennsylvania's highest court.
Coming up, how smoking is way worse for you than you might have thought. Welcome back. Smoking is a lot more dangerous for you than you previously thought. A new report from the Surgeon General now links cigarettes with a number of diseases, including diabetes, arthritis, and liver cancer. It can also hurt your immune system and cause birth defects. And exposure to secondhand smoke can cause a stroke. Today's report comes exactly 50 years after the Surgeon General first warned about the dangers of smoking.
1 in 5 Americans is a smoker. If you're one of them and unemployed, your chances of landing a job could be less. Lori Johnson has the story.
For years, Virginia's Bon Secours hospitals have banned smoking on hospital grounds. But now they're banning smokers themselves.
As a healthcare institution, we believe in supporting good health and being good health models to both each other, the patients, and the community.
The hospital system, which employs some 12,000 workers, joins the Cleveland Clinic and other healthcare powerhouses across the country that snuff out any job applicants who smoke. And that attitude is moving beyond the medical industry. For example, Wheeler Interests is a shopping center company that employs 35 people, but smokers need not apply. John Wheeler instituted the policy 5 years ago, mainly because smokers wasted valuable work time.
People would leave the office, 5 minutes taking down the elevator, 5 minutes outside smoking, 5 minutes come back up on the elevator. Of course, when they came into the office space, they smelled like smoke. They were doing that 8, 9, 10 times a day.
Victoria Paul used to be one of those associates, but today she's smoke-free thanks to the company's policy and the encouragement to quit.
The delivery was in a supportive fashion, and the pressure was probably brought on by myself. I brought, knowing that, you're one of the only ones that's doing it.
But is it legal for an employer to refuse to even consider an applicant who smokes, even if they only do it on their own time? Yes, according to Regent University law professor Bruce Cameron.
There are a number of federal laws that protect you from discrimination, and they protect you from discrimination in 2 areas. Basically, what we call immutable characteristics, that is, things you can't change, no matter how hard you try. And the other area is those areas where the government has decided that the employee's choice is more important than the employer's choice.
Those areas include race, age, gender, disability, and religion. And while federal law doesn't protect smokers, state and local laws can. So if employers can discriminate against smokers, what's next? Obesity comes in as the second most preventable cause of disease, and it's costly as well. An obese employee costs a company, on average, $2,000 a year more than their normal weight counterpart.
Now, an employer could, in fact, discriminate on the basis of an employee's weight. They could discriminate on the basis of an employee's exercise routine. They could discriminate on the basis of an employee's education. In fact, they do it all the time.
So the combination of discrimination against smokers and the tough job market may be the incentive to finally kick the habit. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Up next, see the training it takes to become a guardian of the sea. Coast Guard rescue swimmers have an extremely important job. They jump from helicopters into frigid waters to rescue people.
That's right. And as I recently learned, if they're not trained properly, it can mean the difference between life and death.
Your first one-man rescue scenario. You have 10 minutes to complete the evolution. You need to signal for your rescue device. Do you have any questions? No, let's go.
A rescue swimmer candidate prepares for a major milestone in a grueling 24-week training program.
Checking fins, checking trident, checking mask.
One of the toughest tests for rescue swimmer candidates is what's called the non-compliant survivor test. After jumping off this 15-foot platform into the pool below, the rescue swimmer must then safely get control of an uncooperative swimmer and put that swimmer into this rescue harness.
All right, sir. Where do you want? Now keep your arms inside, okay? Fire station, please. Ready to hoist.
Playing the victim, an instructor at the Aviation Technical Training Center in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Others grade the test from inside and outside the pool, critiquing every move. The rescue swimmer gets 3 tries to pass. Fail the test, and you pack your bags. A lot's at stake for these Coast Guard airmen. They've already invested 10 weeks in the most demanding training program in the Coast Guard.
Approximately 65 to 70% will not make it through the program. Although we get some incredibly gifted athletes into our program, the toughest part of this training is definitely in the pool. And it's a combination of persistence, courage, comfort in the water. And, some of the students have it and some don't. If they do, we can enhance it. And if they don't, there's nothing you can do to give them that. But we do everything that we can for those who are determined to make it through the program to see that they will succeed.
That includes 20-year-old Tyler Poole, one of the few to pass the non-compliant survivor test.
If you're gonna do it, full-heartedness. Don't come in halfway. It's gotta be everything. For me, there's nothing else. I'm stuck here for not here, but in the Coast Guard for another 5 years. And there's nothing else here I want to do besides be a rescue swimmer. So if you're going to do it, go all the way.
Poole says the 2006 film The Guardian, starring Kevin Costner and Ashton Kutcher, inspired him to be a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. Chief Ken Keast is one of the instructors.
I coined the phrase, we are the guardian angels. People are out there in distress. It's dark, it's stormy. They're at their most worst, and they're more than likely praying to Jesus to save them. And who comes overhead? Their guardian angel in an orange helicopter, and they deploy a Coast Guard rescue swimmer.
In 2011, the Coast Guard reported it saved the lives of around 3 out of 4 people it went after on the water. Coast Guard helicopter crews save approximately 850 lives each year. In 2005, that number spiked to around 7,500, the vast majority being Hurricane Katrina victims. Keast, a rescue swimmer for 22 years, knows firsthand the importance of the job. His Christian faith also motivates him to see recruits succeed.
I pray every day for these students. I get on my knees in my office before I come out and before they get in the pool, and I just ask for His guiding strength and the Holy Spirit to fill these students with courage, strength, and endurance that they all make it through this school. We need these students through this school.
Instructor Petty Officer First Class Rob Morgan says the fleet's current number of rescue swimmers is around 80% of the ideal total. He says a recently revamped training program will help grow that number without compromising skill level.
I think the way we've designed the program, what it's done is it's actually done a good job at building these students up rather than weeding them out. Give a hand to the guy that wrote our fitness program, it's done a good job, and they're actually getting stronger, the ones that are focused.
A new multi-million-dollar training facility can also be credited with producing tougher students. Keast demonstrates a touchscreen control panel that produces waves in the pool, turns on fans which can simulate 70-mile-per-hour winds, triggers nozzles which spray sheets of rain, and controls dozens of sound effects: thunder, rotors, jets, foghorns, and sirens, just to name a few. 28-year-old Graham McGinnis recently graduated from the rescue swimmer school. It was his second try, yet his perseverance paid off. New Orleans is his next assignment.
I've learned so much about myself, and I've learned so much about the power of God and what He really can do when you need Him the most, especially. So, it's been a big journey. It's been a lot for me.
A lot of prayer for you?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's amazing where you can squeeze in a prayer. As long as you got a spare second, you got time to make a prayer.
Like Keast, McGinnis is a Christian. He says he was 8 years old when he knew he wanted to be a rescue swimmer.
God's got a higher calling for me, and for me, it's jumping out of helicopters.
And rescuing those in the waters below.
Wow, I'll tell you what, Wendy, those guys are in incredible shape, and they need to be, because it's a dangerous job.
Yeah, it's not something that they might do. They got to do it.
Yeah.
What a great story, Mark. Thank you so much.
And they are like guardian angels out there.
Oh, no doubt about it.
We'll be right back.
Up next, this year's Super Bowl brings together sports and fashion in New York.
Finally tonight, only weeks away from the Super Bowl in New Jersey, just across the state line, New York City is taking football to another level.
Yeah, fashion. That's because the city found a way to bring fashion and football together for a good cause. Joining forces with the NFL, Bloomingdale's has created Fashion's Dream Team, bringing 48 of the country's top fashion designers together to create football helmets to be auctioned off for charity.
It's amazing to see the enthusiasm people have for the CFDA and also for charity, which is really important to Bloomingdale.
The bidding begins at a low $248 a helmet. 100% of the net proceeds are going to the NFL Foundation youth football program that focuses on health and safety. And I like that one. I like the fur.
I could see you wearing a mohawk, a fur mohawk.
Yeah, I like
football
that
helmet.
one.
Yeah.
I like fur anyway.
Yeah, you should look into it.
Give me $248. Come on.
I'll let you handle that on your own.
Come on, it's for a good cause.
You make the big bucks.
All right, we'll talk. Pray for him, everybody. Well, that's all for this edition of Newswatch.
Have a great weekend.
Good night.